Great. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and showing up for our second webinar as part of our Carnegie Applicant Engagement Series. I'm Marisol Morales and I serve as the Executive Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications. And we're really happy to have you be part of our webinar on applying for the third time. We know that there's a lot of learning to do, and we've got some wonderful colleagues from across the country who are going to share with us their thoughts, strategies, critiques, observations, and hopes around the third time application. So with that, I also want to introduce Lauren Barchi, who's the Associate Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications. And again, if folks can put themselves on mute, that'd be great. Thank you. And I will throw it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will get set with our questions and conversations. Patrick, you want to start us off?
You bet. Thank you, Marisol. My name is Patrick Green. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Engaged Learning, Teaching, and Scholarship at Loyola University Chicago. I am applying for the 2024 Carnegie Community Engagement application, and I also facilitated the application in 2008 and in 2015. And I will pass it to Emily.
Thanks so much, Patrick. I'm Emily Yankee. I direct the Institute for Community and Economic Engagement at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I'm an associate professor in the Peace and Conflict Studies Department. I joined UNC Greensboro in 2008, the first year that they got the elective classification. I wrote it in 2015, and I am also going to be the lead writer. I should say I wrote it. I was the lead writer in 2015, and I will be the lead writer again for this 2024 cycle coming. And I've served on the National Advisory Panel for Carnegie since 2014. Great to see everybody. And I'll pass it over to Brenda.
Great, thanks, Emily. Hi, my name is Brenda Marsteller-Kovalevsky. I am the Associate Provost for High Impact Educational Experiences and Faculty Excellence at Weber State University, which is located in Ogden, Utah. We're just north of Salt Lake and we have the best snow on earth. That's how you should know us. I have been, well, I wrote the application in 2008, 2015, and we'll be doing it again in 2026. We're opting to apply in 2026. And I should use Patrick's language of I facilitated the process, and Emily's language, I co-wrote with quite a few other co-writers the application in all three of those years. So pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Justin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Sipes. I'm the director of the Center for Community-Based Learning, which is at University of North Florida in Northeast Florida in Jacksonville. I've been with the center since 2016, so as part of our team for the 2020 application. And for 2026, when we go up again, I will be the primary individual in ushering us through that process. So yeah, and I've been at UNF for 10 years, so I was not a part of the very first application that UNF submitted, but as part of coming over to the center when I did in 2016, became well-versed in our initial applications. That way I could be effective in my role moving into our second application cycle. So.
Great, thanks to all of you for your introductions and the context for your institutions. Before we get started with the questions, we have a question for all of the folks on the webinar today. We've got a poll that we'll be launching, so if folks can answer, when does your institution plan to reclassify, 24 or 26? You can just kind of see where folks are at. Okay, a few more seconds. All right. It looks like the vast majority of folks will be applying in 26. That's what we've been planning for too. So we're glad that we were able to set out the dates, and seeing a lot of institutions starting the process now in terms of thinking about the application for 26. So thanks so much. And did we share the results? Can everybody see the results? No, I'll do that. Yeah. Great. Perfect. Thank you all. So I guess my first question, and this can be for all of you, is why would you apply for the community engagement elective classification multiple times? Why put yourself through that? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I'll kick us off, I suppose. Seeing as how I've sort of shepherded this through it will be 3 times by the time 2026 rolls around. I have found the process incredibly helpful. The first time around, it was very much a roadmap. I found the classification application itself very much a roadmap for helping us to build, if we hadn't already built, the structures and the processes on campus that we needed. So I found that process really enriching, and it was an opportunity to bring folks together. So I kind of fell in love with the process, if you will, and what it did for our campus and what it did for institutionalizing community engaged work on our campus and then eventually in our community. And because now our community owns this classification with us, which is a really interesting kind of transition that has occurred from the first round to the second round. So to me, every time that we have applied, we have had really fantastic outcomes from the process itself. And therefore, we're kind of looking forward to seeing what comes out of the next time around. I'll leave it there and let my colleagues jump in, and maybe I'll add a little bit more later.
Thanks, Brenda. Others?
I'll jump in and say I have been asking myself that question, why would I do this multiple times? And so similar to Brenda, had the great privilege of facilitating in 2008, 2015, and then again, we're going up again in 2024. So the more recent reapplication process. The reality is similar to Brenda, I found it very helpful. The ability to engage many voices across campus, to learn what is happening in a little more detail. Again, I think this is not surprising, but many of our campuses are decentralized and distributed. And so community engagement tends to be decentralized in different ways and distributed across campus in different ways. And so I think just being aware of that, and the process allows us to do an institutional self-study, which is framed as to get a landscape assessment, and then to use that as a lever for change. And so in 2008, we certainly used it as a lever to make changes. In 2015, we've used it as a lever, and there are some significant changes that we've made through the process. And we'll talk about some of those institutional changes later. So with that, I will pass it to one of my colleagues.
Thanks, Patrick. Emily or Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think there's a practical component to it too. It's like once you have it twice, you sort of institutionally, there becomes a part of your brand. And so then to not continue working in that direction forward and not applying again, I think that brings up some questions, right? So why wouldn't you do it? And I think that's something that, like I'll openly admit, I have not been tasked with acquiring this for a third time at this point. We have a brand new president. He hasn't provided that directive I'm operating from a place that I'm assuming that's what we're going to want, but that hasn't actually happened yet. But I see, and I'm trying to convince other colleagues after lots of change and transition, which will come up later on as well, this becomes an opportunity to explain and show people, provide context, show some past, show how we've grown, where we are now, and then where we can aspire to be as an institution with regards to how we operate in this, and use community engagement as a tool, as a piece of what it is that we are, how we try to provide impact for our community, and like how that assists our students in their own learning and growth as well.
Justin, Emily?
Yeah, so ditto for all of this. It's a process, it's super helpful. If we didn't do it, the cost of not doing it would look like we had walked away from community engagement, even if we're doing all the same stuff. And so in terms of institutional image management, that's important, especially now. We are looking for places not just to be great, but to be distinctive. And so it is an area of distinction for UNCG in a system of 16 campuses to be community engaged, and R2 community engaged. That's a lot of what we say. We're one of 50, right? That's a cool number. And I would also just sort of share that. So I came in 2008 when we had it. And so what I got to see was the power of having that distinction. Our campus was having some conversations about community engagement and promotion and tenure through an ad hoc committee. And the provost at the faculty senate meeting that fall in 2008 said, Carnegie has like bestowed upon us this, has recognized us as a community engaged institution. Shouldn't we act that way? So shouldn't we be putting together these policies or supporting community engaged scholars? And so that was a real moment where I was like, oh, wow, this gave him some leverage. It was a real standard that he says, we are not like we want to be, but he really claimed our identity. And so in terms of theory of change, that really helped me see that in that first era, we were going through this sort of organizational image and identity management, that it was reflective, right? So we could use this mirror of what the world was saying or Carnegie was saying to us as a way to say, yes, that's who we are. I am wonderful, aren't I? And so that we did a lot of work then. By the time that 2015 came up, we were really looking at sort of going from individual to collective, and sort of saying, okay, so we do have all this like really cool work. How do we make sure that we are putting in some processes to help us do this work in a more collective way? And so through the classification process, we had those conversations. It wasn't that we had done it all by then. It was that 2020 application process helped us think about that some more. And so the theory of change was really thinking about sort of aligning talents and priorities with the community, but through moving from individual to collective. And now for the 2024 that we're working on right now, it's really looking at deep, pervasive, and integrative. So Echo Hill and Green's work on change and institutionalization. And so Patrick talked about how we're really distributed, decentralized. That's been like a superpower, honestly. Because you can't like strike out one office and take out community engagement. So that's been a superpower. But the challenge is that, especially with, we've had 3 provosts in 4 years, just through a quick succession. So that means that we, Carnegie, and having this process as well as this classification means that we need to keep talking about how this gets integrated into our core strategy, especially now, given budget cuts, enrollment decreases, and things like that. So yeah, so it's pretty important. And I would also say that it does feel like our chancellor still is counting on it in the sense of our strategic plan, our strategic directions. Community engagement is one of 4 strategic priorities. So it does feel like this is, if we weren't to get this, we would have a lot we need to answer for.
Yeah, thank you all. That's really helpful. I appreciate, Brenda, you talking about the ownership of this process and, you know, what it's meant internally and for staff. Patrick, you raising the decentralized and distributed, and how do we, like, we know our institutions are like that, how do we manage that and utilize this as a tool? You know, thinking about institutional image and what that means, what having this means, and the leverage that it provides to executive leadership, right? Trying to move initiatives forward. And Justin, I love the, why wouldn't we, right? Like, it's there, we're doing this, why wouldn't we? We might have to use that as a tagline. I think the reality of it is that, you know, all of these things are great and true, as is sort of the stress of it and what it takes to put this together. So can you talk about sort of stress, hopes, and opportunities you feel like arise with the application, and particularly if you have experienced change? I mean, all of you have some consistency, right, between the different cycles, but we know that there's many institutions who are going to apply for the third time, right, second reclass, whose teams are new. And so what do you see in that, or what advice would you give to folks? So I guess it's a two-part question in terms of the kind of stress, hopes, and opportunities, but also advice for those whose institutions have this, but they're new to the process. And anybody can jump in.
I can speak briefly. I know I spoke a lot, so I'll keep this short. I think, you know, as we look at telling our best story, right? To like tell your best story is the advice. And I think that the challenge is that some things have been really great for a while and we thought they were great and they were going to go on forever, like assessment or administering surveys like Nessie or Bessie that had some things embedded in them. And there are other ones also that, but wow, like all of a sudden they're gone, right? Like 2 or 3 years ago, we stopped administering some surveys. And so I think it can feel stressful of like, oh no, in our last application, we had all of these things that were really like routinized and it felt really good and that looked pretty. And I think that, so it can be stressful to think of how have things changed since the last application, because COVID's happened, budgets, like a lot of stuff has happened, and it can make us feel worse off. And I think that in telling it, when I start to look at our best story and when I've brought together colleagues to have the conversation about how are we going to answer this, in those meetings, I've been reminded of our power and all of the work that people have continued to do, that like, I was so focused on that one thing that felt institutional to me, but because it's been really deep and pervasive in various units, they remind me that they are doing really great reciprocal work, that they do have even some informal, but very continuous and meaningful assessments of partnerships. And so that if things have changed, that's okay. They're like, change is constant. That's what we can expect in life. And so that's certainly going to be true. So I think I was worried at first that I would have to say, well, like, we did that, but not anymore. We did that, but not anymore. And I don't think that's the story. I don't think that's our best story. I think our best story is talking about all this work that people have done to persist, as well as to progress in their partnerships. And so I'm excited to tell that story.
And I'll just jump off of that. I love, Emily, how you framed that. And I would add, tell your best authentic story. And by that, what I mean is not only what Emily said of, wow, amidst all this change, because within my own institutional context, we've had significant leadership change. We've had significant staffing changes. We've had significant organizational changes. And so all of these different dimensions of change that have happened, as Emily said, the community engagement has continued. And here are the areas where it has thrived. Here are the areas where it has deepened and is pervasive and over time has strengthened. But also, here are areas where we are still needing to develop. And no one is looking for a perfect institution and perfect community engagement, because those applications, number one, aren't real and are going to cause a lot of suspicion. What we want is the best authentic story of how we're doing this well, and here are the areas for growth and opportunity. And here are, amidst the changes that happened, where community engagement was deepened and longitudinal and pervasive. And here are the areas where we still need to grow and do better. And so I think sharing that, for me, that's one of my hopes. And it goes back to what Brenda and I were talking about in response to the first question. Being in dialogue about this allows us to understand the landscape of community engagement at our institution, but even more importantly, within our communities, and positioning the institution in, of, and with the community. And I think for me, it is such a lesson in listening to what is going on, both the good and the areas of development.
So I'll jump in. So yes, all of that change on our campuses is incredibly stressful. And part of the reason why we're waiting to 2026 to apply is because of all of the changes that have been occurring on our campus. And so I think the stressor for me is because I haven't started thinking about what is that best authentic story as deeply as Emily and Patrick have been thinking about it, because they're in it right now, having those dialogues on their campuses. My stress, my worry is, oh my gosh, I don't know if we have a best story anymore. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like, that's worrying me. And I am hopeful. And I think that I know we have been doing good work. So I think that story will emerge. But sitting in my seat right now, I'm worried, right? Like, oh my gosh, what's that best authentic story going to be? And it's not going to be the same as it was the last time. And so yeah, so that's my stressor. But I think there's real opportunity in this process. That whole notion of bringing all the folks together. So the piece of advice, Emily started with her piece of advice. Let me mix my piece of advice in here. If there is someone on your campus who thinks that they are doing community engagement, invite them to the party, invite them to the table, invite them to the conversation. I didn't shut anyone out. And every single time I have found that to be incredibly fruitful, because this is the opportunity. Not only are you discovering or learning more deeply about the things that are occurring, they are buying in. They're buying in not only to the process, but they're buying into your work. They're buying into the brand, to the identity. Invite them to the table. So I think there's real power and opportunity there. So even as worried as I am hopeful, and I can identify that opportunity that's sitting there in front of me. So I don't know, Justin, any thoughts?
Well, I think there's real stress around your campus got it twice. What happens if you don't get it a third time? And even though I know, okay, I might be helping lead our campus in the process, I'm also not in a position where I'm making a lot of institutional decisions that can impact portions of our narrative. And I think one of the things that, for me, since I also recently elevated into the role of director within the past year, since we submitted our application in 2019, we're on our third university president too. So we've had a provost position that has been a turnstile, unfortunately, and we finally have some permanency in that. We've seen a dissolution of our student affairs division and that being merged into our academic affairs division. So that creates a lot of turmoil and questions. But what I will say has been great within this past year is I've been meeting with more and more people across campus who are like, I'm doing community engaged work, but I don't know who you are. I don't know what your office does. And I'm like, wait, where all these people keep coming from? Because I thought we had it pretty well figured out at our last application. But I'm learning that as new people are coming in through all these transitions, they are getting connected to us. We're getting more connected to them. We're figuring out what that means. We're having some of these conversations around, we have some good systems in place, but then a system is good to help with tracking, but now how are we taking that to the next level? So what does that really mean at this next phase? I can say that fortunately, our course-based community engagement has rebounded to the point we're almost right back at 2019 levels. That's amazing. I also can say we have more faculty here doing community engaged teaching than we did pre-pandemic. So what does that mean for the large institution? And that's something that I'm working with my colleagues to figure out. Where is all this infused vigor around doing community engaged work, and how can we tap into that and take advantage of it in ways that we can really thinking through the integration and institutionalization around making these things permanent parts of our program of study for our different disciplines and majors. How can we infuse and create better pathways for our students from a co-curricular lens? Students in Florida need to do service as part of a Bright Future scholarship. They come to our institution. How are we seeing where they're coming and then making sure we have opportunity for them so they can continue that work in a more seamless way versus trying to find those opportunities on their own. So those are some of the things that we're starting to get into more deeply, but it's great when I have an email from a faculty member who's like, hey, I don't think we've ever connected with your office. Can we meet and talk about, because here's what I'm doing. And I want to make sure that it's being recognized at the university level. So.
Great, thank you all. So can you talk a little bit about community partnerships and what has it been like to have these long-term sustained community partners, and what difference do you feel it's making institutionally for your students, faculty, and staff, but also what difference do you think it makes to your application process, whether you're going up in 24 or 26? And maybe we'll start with the folks who are going up in 24 and then move to those who are going up in 26.
I'm happy to get started. So we in the field of community engagement, we often talk about community partners as coeducators, and I think realistically that's an aspirational approach. We often talk also about mutually beneficial and reciprocal, and I think mutually beneficial is realistic and reciprocal is an aspirational approach to partnerships. So I want to frame my comments kind of with just defining that a little bit. I will say that as we have worked towards these long-term, deeper relationships with community partners, and really tried to work closer to that aspiration of coeducator, that the learning value proposition for our students, for our faculty and staff as educators, really opening up that learning and teaching space to co-educators as community partners, I will say has been transformative. And so everything from having community partners as co-instructors of community-based learning courses to other more cutting edge, I think, models. We've seen more dialogue around what does this mean to open up the teaching and learning space but then also some very logistical as we encourage students to enter into communities as neighbors rather than as consumers, to really generate dialogue and conversation around, you know, as a neighbor, as a citizen, what does that look like to be a participant, a community member, a learner? And so I think it's really enabled us to have these rich conversations and transformed our teaching and learning spaces. I think also it has had allowed us to have conversations around fostering different epistemological and ontological approaches around scholarship and research. And so it really has enriched our conversations with faculty around engaged scholarship, around faculty, students, and community partners. Where does knowledge and wisdom and experience intersect, reside? Where is it located, and how can we elevate the knowledge, wisdom, and experience from the community to make that equivalent to that in the academy? And so I think these relationships, these long-term deepened relationships, have allowed us to operate from different perspectives to challenge, I think, the institutional norms of higher education, and certainly the institutional norms of our specific institution, but also has allowed us to take a place-based, hyper-local engagement approach, and so given us permission that we cannot be everything to everyone and all to the community, to say, but here's what we can do. And when we approach this from a hyper-local community engagement perspective, that we're honoring place in a very specific way by taking this place-based approach. So I think it has shaped not only dialogue and conversations and ways of approaching the work, but it has literally shaped the way that we do community engagement because of these long-term relationships, the feedback, the dialogue, the conversation from our community partners. I'll just stop there and pass it to Emily.
I think what I've seen with many of the long-term community partners is that they've, one is like success, I use the word persistence quite a bit now. And so for a while during COVID, like a metric of success was persistence. Like we're still in relationship with each other. We're checking in with each other. And then what it started to look like was that we were also like totally rethinking what our relationship was to each other. So a lot of folks got real uncomfortable, just like if it wasn't mutually beneficial on both sides, right? And then when we started to get real about what is mutually beneficial, sometimes it was just like, you know what, right now we need a pause. And I saw, and that was especially true in like civil rights organizing groups and also in schools. And so I think those are really interesting stories because they didn't go away, but they really transformed like in many, many ways. And so I think that, I think our relationships that we have that have persisted and been sustained are like very real. And folks have a sense of the value and the commitment, and that like, this is one of the special ones that lasted. So I just think I feel really proud of those and feel really good about those. I also, I used to be one of the folks who was like, partnerships on campus are like really campus partnerships, not community engagement partnerships. And I'm seeing more and more how our students' health and wellness and also food insecurity as residents, and that we don't just have community organizations, but we have residents that we partner with and grassroots movements and informal organizations. They're off campus, they're on campus. And so I'm seeing more and more opportunity for us to do this like democratically civic engagement work on our campuses in ways that I resisted before. I know a lot of people were on the other side, but like I've sort of like come around and understood, because so many of our students are hungry right now. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that that's actually where, in general, the field has a lot to learn from community colleges, who've had a lot of their programming on campus because of their direct connection to, the very localized community. And it also bodes for a larger discussion, right, about our students, the communities that they're coming from, and how we change our practice to meet them where they're at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Brenda and Justin, your thoughts on community partnerships?
Sure. For me and my experience at UNF, I think it's been able to see some of the partnerships from our original application and how they've moved over time and changed. And I think it's also sort of recognizing that, and Emily spoke to this a bit too, and also with Patrick, the idea that we want all these things to be in a transformational space, but that's not always where they can be. And understanding and working with our campuses and our community partners to understand that if something needs to take a pause, or if we need to pull back into maybe more of a transactional space for a little bit, that's not to say that that's still not good partnership or relationship. That's just where things are around where needs are and what capacity might be. And I think we learned a lot about capacity over the last few years, and we're still wrestling with that to a certain degree too. And not everyone, community partners, campuses, have recovered at the same rate. We still have other things that are still happening. I mean, right now, Southwestern Florida is, large portions of that are in a really bad place. And whereas my campus was not directly impacted in the same way, we have students that don't have a place to return to because of what recently happened. And so then how do we as a campus respond to that and try to make sense of that and help with that? And I think these are things that we will continue to deal with as we're dealing with, most recently, COVID, future pandemics, and other things like climate change. Like, these are things that we will consistently be grappling with, and what that means for our relationship to community and how we support and work with community as institutions of higher education. But I will say the other side of it too, academically, I'm seeing more faculty who are trying to navigate their own discipline spaces and want to create more public facing aspects of their research and scholarship and creative activity, because they see a need that having things in a peer-reviewed journal isn't the place that the public can access these documents and things. And so those conversations are also great because they see that we're doing good work in the academy, but we need to translate it in ways that help with public policy and with making legislative changes in various aspects. So that piece of it too, I think, is great because they want to train students in coming out of their degree programs with the skills and dispositions and knowledge to be successful in having an impact as a citizen with their discipline knowledge as well. So
I honestly would echo much of what's already been said. I don't have a lot of newness to add to this conversation. I'll maybe put an exclamation point on the hyperlocal point that Patrick brought up, because I think these trusted community partnerships and trust is critical, right? I mean, these long-standing community partnerships, they have been the bedrock. When we first applied round one, we were writing about community partnerships. Literally in our application, we were writing about them. Round two, we were writing with our community partners. And we were kind of co-constructing and reimagining together in the process. And I fully expect round 3 will be that and more. And I haven't experienced it yet, so I don't know exactly what magic's going to happen, but I'm confident something will. But since round 2, that hyper-local focus was able to emerge because of this co-construction together, this trust that we have of one another, this co-ownership of this classification. Carnegie classifies institutions of higher ed. Our community partners, they don't know that or care. They own it. It's theirs too. It's ours. I'm like, bring that right on, right? So that created this environment where we could pull together anchor institutions in our community and say, we need to focus on housing and health and education and these things that are really, and we need to do it together. We need to do it collectively. And we trusted one another enough to stick our necks out, our organizational necks out, to do the work. So I think those long-term partnerships, they're the bedrock. Other partnerships come and go, and some do take a pause and become transactional, and that's okay. But I think those others, they're the bedrock of the work. So.
Yeah, and I love that point, because not all partnerships are the same, right? And so sometimes there's this, I remember when I started, it was like this quantity, how many community partners do we have? And the more we named, right? But there were others that were like, they were our deep partners. So they may not have been the 250 we listed, but they were like the 15 that, like, they needed us, they could make a call. We needed them, we could make a call, and we kind of figured things out together. And those, I do think are the core of what this application looks at. And the recent changes in the application has moved that to the beginning, right? So part of the application reorganization is that the part about community partners is front and center at the beginning. Give us the context, tell us the outcomes. What are you doing with community partners, to really ground this application and what we're asking for. So I want to transition before we open it up in about 15 minutes to our participants to ask you all questions. But as you're thinking about the teams that are going to be putting this together, like, who's on there? All of you obviously will have significant lead roles in it, but who are going to be your road dogs in this application process? Who are you reaching out to? What are your sort of different levels of teams as you're putting this together? And like, what kind of data are you looking at within your institution? So I think I'm going to start with Emily, if that's okay.
Sure. This time around, we put together a UNCG engagement council. I've always wanted to have an engagement council, and it always felt like we're waiting for the provost, like the right provost, right? And then we had this series, but we created one last year, and part of the work was looking at DEI and community engagement, as well as doing we called it a self-study in preparation for the Carnegie reclass. And so we were looking at a lot of folks so we basically, org chart, right? Anybody who has responsibility for or connection information about community university connections. So kind of like Brenda said, like, everybody, you think you want to be involved, like, you're involved. And so that council also, in terms of faculty, so it's quite a number of administrators. So faculty maybe who now have administrative positions. So their job is to show up at meetings, because there's such pressure and kind of burnout right now with faculty. We're pretty careful about asking them to serve on things. So the faculty that are serving on the engagement council have been folks who are connected, like, to the general education curriculum or high impact practices. And so they've got some connection to faculty senate or to like major initiatives. And so if you think about it, it's that integrated, deep, pervasive, integrated into the strategic priorities and core things that we have to do no matter how much our budget gets cut or how tired we are. those are the folks that I have. And so that's been amazing, because for a number of them, they're like, oh my gosh, this is like, they're seeing the connections and they're really excited because they've already worked so darn hard on general education curriculum or on high impact practices. So they're seeing this as a great opportunity to be connected.
Thanks, Emily. Others?
I'll add to the list because yes, Emily, those are the people that I will be tapping as well. The folks that are leading out on our strategic plan, you're saying UNCG has community engagement as one of 4 outcomes. We have it as one of 5 in our strategic plan. And so there is a full-on task force that is focused on that community anchor mission, is what we're calling it in our strategic plan. And those folks will be involved. We have a NICE network, a network for innovation, community, and economic engagement. And there are a lot of folks that will be on that network that will be coming into this process. We have personal connections and academic excellence, which is where a bunch of our high impact educational experiences, our high impact practices, those folks are. Community engagement plays a prominent role there. So there are these committees, if you will, these institutionalized committees. We're going to be drawing from that. But I'm going to add to the list, and they're all strategic plan aligned. Office of Institutional Effectiveness, our assessment folks, they will be at this table in a big kind of way. Our marketing and communication folks, they will be at the table in a big kind of way. Community partners, it'll be our anchors. That's who will be at the table for sure. And our Center for Community Engaged Learning, which is one of the centers that reports up through my office, they will be prominent in the work and probably leading some of the task forces that will spin out. So.
Thanks, Patrick or Justin?
Yeah, I'll just share, again, since we're in the midst of this now, we created a 2-tiered system. We have a community engagement core committee, which is made up of units within units that are directly facilitating community engagement in some way. So not only my center, the Center for Engaged Learning, Teaching, and Scholarship, but our community-based research center, our community service co-curricular unit, our community relations unit, some other academic community engagement centers as well. So they're making up the core committee, which will likely be, you know, I think Emily used the language of lead writer and Brenda mentioned co-written. Those are going to be some of the other main writers that will help facilitate the reapplication process. Then we have a larger community engagement task force, which, similar to Emily's council, is made up of representatives from across university. And I mean, honestly, in answer to Marisol's question of, you know, who are you going to ask to help with this, is anybody who will say yes. And so, you know, there are representatives from every school and college at my university. And we approached this with not just who is involved in a form of community engagement at our university. We actually approached this with who do we want to engage in dialogue to deepen community engagement. So a representative from every school, college, etc., representative from units all over, representative from athletics, representative from campus ministry, representative from faculty senate, staff council, etc. So again, we were really strategic, but the point of differentiation and how we've approached this in the past is not only to get broad representation and certainly individuals who are engaged in community engagement, but rather who do we want to engage in dialogue, discussion, and thought leadership around deepening community engagement at our institution, because that's what this process allows for.
Yeah, and similar to the others, we have a community engagement advisory group that we formalized after the last application. And so when we received our feedback from Carnegie, I was like, okay, here are the 6 areas they're asking all campuses to focus on. So we're going to create a group, and we have 5 subgroups that are focused on those 5 areas. I admit the infrastructure one because we intentionally, we weren't going to have a vice president of community engagement. We're just, unfortunately, we're not there. But our vice president and chief diversity officer has a large component of his portfolio is about external engagement with the community. So he is the co-chair of this group with myself. And we have our 5 subgroups where we intentionally tapped folks at the institution who we know are deeply tied into those units and areas that we need to grow the most as an institution around community engagement. So that's how we've gone about structuring our particular group. And we have community participation, we have student participation in that. We have our development officer is also a part of it. And that way, when that person is hearing some of the good ideas and good things that are coming out of our group, they have the capacity to say, hey, I might have someone who'd be interested in funding this, or, you know, that sounds like I might have a prospect who is really in tune to this area and wants to get involved. And we've been thinking about intentional ways. So we have a student affairs community council. How do we integrate something that already exists into this group as well? And what are the structures that we can make sure that we have continual presence from that particular council also within our group as well. So those are some of the things that we've been trying to get in place, even though we're not going up until 2026. I mean, it's an ongoing process, right? It should never just be like, oh, application's coming up, let me hurry up and get the team together and bang this out. And then over the next few months, like that's not a good way to be successful in something that, as many of you know, or if you haven't done it yet, you'll soon find out, is a time-intensive process and self-study, and involves lots of people across your institution, and sometimes people that you've never even heard of. You need to find those people and get them involved because they have that little nugget of information that is really going to help you in that particular section of your narrative. So.
And I'll add, when we reclassified in 2015, we brought together a group to write it and like contribute, and the working groups and all that stuff. And then when it was over, our task was done, we disbanded. And then it was like, oh wait, we just identified these things we need to do, but like we no longer had that group together. And they were the perfect people to keep together, and we just missed that opportunity. So this time, creating that council for us is that the purpose of the council is not the application. Last year, the year before we're going to apply, it was to do a self-study. Hey, we'll use Carnegie. We're going to use it anyway, but it's best practice. So at the end of last year, we had a report that said, hey, these are the areas in terms of best practice where we have some gaps. Yeah, we need to address this for Carnegie, but this is really about our campus, right? Being a distinctive campus around community engagement. So that's a lesson that I learned in terms of like the who, and like when you're asking them, I would encourage you to think about that this is a council or this is a group that persists beyond, because if it's about best practices, then you're going to need to keep the band together. The other part this year is that because we're distributed across divisions, I'm in the Office of Research and Engagement. So I report to the Chief Research Officer. We also have a division of student success and undergraduate studies, and then student affairs as well. So we actually propose that we're co-chairs as 3 people. And that's very unusual to have 3 co-chairs. It feels like, wow, that's a lot of redundant effort. What it's actually done is it means that we have to get together, right? If we've got this council, we have to pull together. Oh, we got to meet, right? So it's just like that accountability partner when you're, you know, in grad school or whatever it is, it's like there are accountability partners that we get together and we push this forward, and we have those conversations. Even when every other campus fire crisis is happening, like we still have to get together. because this has to happen. So I would also recommend that it's not a single lead, that it's co, because that'll help you when things are really tough, when you're sitting there, you know, like Brenda talked earlier about like, oh my gosh, in my office by myself, like we don't have a best story, or that's not such a good, I can't come up with a good one. Like your colleagues will like help you come up with a really good one. But if you structure your team in such a way that you have like a built-in accountability partner, I think that would be really helpful.
I love that idea. And so what I'm hearing from all of you is that the preference or the recommendation is around long-term committee as opposed to like a one-off just for the application, right? That consistency matters and that it will help from cycle to cycle. That's great. So before we move into our like Q&A sessions, I'm selfishly going to ask this one, but what would you like to see the Carnegie team, also known as Marisol and Lauren, and Don, do for reclassifying institutions? What can we do better to support campuses like yours? And I also encourage like folks who are participants to also throw your ideas in the chat. But yeah, like what can we do to help support institutions like yours that are going up third time?
My first question is, did you guys get rid of like word counts and like character counts? Are they like gone from the application? Because let me tell you, they are stressful.
They are not. But they're mostly 500 words each section, and some sections are 1,000. And we have to, yes, and we have to be kind to the reviewers, right? That's the other piece, because they're already hefty applications, and so. Yeah.
I was saying that in jest, but actually it was a very stressful part of the process.
Yeah, editing.
and I'm on my light note here, so I'm just going to kind of continue on a little bit of a light note, but you know, when we're serving students, we have student hours, office hours. Have you guys thought about doing something like that?
I'm so glad you asked. Oh, we do. At AC Engage, we have drop-in Q&A sessions pretty much bi-weekly. And so if folks sign up for AC Engage, which I believe Lauren will put in the chat, then you can see our kind of office hours drop-in Q&A. And we're always happy to like meet with folks. Just email us and we are happy to meet with you individually or with your teams for questions that you may have. Thanks, Brenda. You set it up very nicely for me.
And that wasn't even planned.
I know.
So you all know.
Marisol, in the spirit of wanting to keep something that we saw in past application, that the generalized feedback was really helpful. So for example, when we received the 2015 reapplication, we also received feedback that was generalized, not specific to our institution, that many institutions struggled with assessment, and that in the area of community engagement, we should spend more time facilitating assessment and evaluation in authentic ways. So that was really helpful, because that wasn't good to know that, oh, we weren't alone in struggling in that other institutions were. But on the flip side, besides generalized feedback, some tailored feedback on what we specifically are both doing well and areas of development. And I know that's a big ask with the review process, because you're talking about hundreds of institutions applying, but the degree to which there could be tailored feedback, because I think, as Emily said, we all utilize this to help distinguish our community engagement as a significant pillar of our institutions. But the way that we can then continue to use the feedback for institutional change would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Patrick. And our hope is to be able to do something like that. We're changing the review process. Some of you may have heard this in other kind of trainings or webinars. In the past, there's been a small review committee that has reviewed all applications. We're actually making it a peer review process for this cycle. We're piloting it. And so we'll actually be doing our call for reviewers that will go out November 14th. we'll be doing training between January and I believe April, and then reviews will happen in the summer. But our hope is that through that peer review process, we'll be able to get the specific feedback that we can provide to institutions. So we'll see how it goes. It's a pilot process, but I think because we're gonna sort of spread the love, right, in terms of the review process, it'll allow us the opportunity to pull some direct feedback for campuses as well. Thanks.
This might be superficial, but can we, the new badge, can it say third time? Like, so the one that the campuses get? Because I think that's, you know, it's nice to have that, and in the sense of we have it on our website, we have it in marketing materials, and to say that, like, institutionally there has been a commitment to this for a significant period of time, or we wouldn't be in the place to have it for the third time. So just even a little tweak, doesn't have to be anything fancy or complicated, but yeah.
That's a great idea. We'll run it by the foundation and see. So thanks for that.
The hat trick.
Huh?
It's the hat trick. Anybody who plays sports, it's the hat trick. Times.
Give me an activist analogy and I got you, but sports.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So, anything else? Well, thank you. And folks can always provide us feedback anytime you have. So we're going to actually open it up. We can do one of two things, just like folks can unmute themselves and ask the questions collectively, or we can do breakout groups, or folks can type questions in the chat. So any preference? You can type that in the chat too. All right. I'm not comfortable with silence, so I'm going to make an executive decision and see, maybe we can do breakout groups for about 15 minutes, and then have some small group conversation. That work? And I see some folks are dropping off because we're at the hour, so let's break into groups, and then we'll do it randomly, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so. Lauren, can we do that? Awesome. Thank you all. Great. Okay. I wish Zoom had like a music thing that you can push in between. All right, we'll see you guys soon.
How do we put it together?
Yep. Others? I think from ours, it was buy-in and infrastructure, especially since a lot of people are new. And so what does that look like? Yeah. Anyone else? Well, before we sort of make our announcements, I do want to just provide some recommendations that we've been making to folks as they're applying, especially for reclass. One of the recommendations I have is to make a webpage about your Carnegie experience. In the reclassification process, you can provide links, right, in ways that you can't do in the first time. And so use that as an opportunity to sort of tell your story of your Carnegie journey from, you know, the first to the second to the third, if you're there. It could be, you know, anything from, you know, identifying the members, what you learned in the process, that history. That's another space for context sharing for not only the reviewers, but also for your campus as a whole. So think about, you know, creating a web page that really documents that story that can be used externally. And I think for folks who are applying in 2026, it's good to even do that now as you're inviting people to be part of the process so they can see kind of what has happened. If you want to share your application, you know, on there, that's something, your previous applications, that's something you can do as well. This one is much more narrative based. So really, I think doing that kind of casting the net wide to see the stories that you get in, and then creating a process that may be broad and inclusive to identify those stories that you want to sort of bring to the forefront. Maybe a, you know, interesting way to bring in folks and create buy-in. We were on a call the other day, and for a community of practice that we're doing in partnership with Campus Compact. And one of the participants had shared that she actually participated in the application process when she was a student, that she helped to gather data, and that was a really meaningful project. It was connected to her senior project, and that as a professional, she came into, you know, 2 institutions with having that experience, and then being the one who really pushed the institution to pursue the elective classification. And then, Kristen, you're still here. Can you talk about your working groups? Because I love the way that you shared how they're broken up.
Sure. Yeah, I shared in our group that we, our core team looks across the application thematically, and then we organize smaller working groups based on things like storytelling, curriculum, co-curriculum. So then that way, it wasn't necessarily by section of the application, but it was more thematic than that. To be able to leverage those folks there.
And some of their working groups are equity and inclusion, community assessment, curricular assessment, co-curricular assessment, strategic planning. So just different ways of kind of organizing that team. And if you have ideas, like we would love to have you post that on ACE Engage to share that with others as they're thinking about the ways in which they're creating their teams or collecting their data. Any kind of last share outs, reflections, other things? Right. Lauren, do you want to share what we've got in store?
Yes, I can.
All
righty. So just a recap, if you are currently thinking about applying in the 2024 cycle, here's our timeline. The big reminder is that your intent to apply, which means purchase the application, is October 31st. So in just a couple of weeks. This will help us with that peer review process we mentioned. So we know how many people intend to apply, and we get the appropriate number of reviewers. But don't worry, it's not due till May 1st, 2023, and then we'll launch that review process. If you are thinking about 2026, here are the dates. You'll release the application in January 2024. We'll have an intent to apply purchase deadline November 4th, 2024. It'll be due April 1st. And that's because we will have hopefully a lot of applications in then, and that gives us some more time to review than usual. And that same release date in January of 2026. These are on our website. So if you didn't quite catch the dates today or scrambled to write them down, it's live and active on our website. So hopefully you can catch them there. If there's any confusion on who needs to reclassify when, hopefully we've put across the message now that if you were last classified in 2015, you can choose between 2024 or 2026. Either is fine. It's up to your capacity and interests. I think you heard a lot of perspectives today about how you might choose to do so on your campus. And if you were last classified in 2020, you can wait until 2026, or you should wait until 2026. And if you were last classified in 2006, 8, or 10, and never reclassified, you're going to reapply as a first time. And Green's application. We get a lot of questions about data. And just lay it out there. If you are applying now in 2024, you can use pre-COVID data. So academic year 2018-19 through this past academic year, you can mix and match your data across the application. We just ask that you identify within each question what year the data comes from. That helps us. The only question that you can't mix and match is in the section on curricular activity, where we ask numbers. That's only from 1 year. In the 2026 application, you can use data from academic year 22-23, so right now, or next academic year 23-24, as long as you have had time to assess that data. That's the caveat.
Yeah, it's and.
It's an and, right? Thank you, it's an and. The same thing, you can mix and match your data and you'll just notate it in each question what year it's from. But just make sure it's assessed first and you understand it before using it. Okay, so if you're thinking about applying in 26, you're hopefully collecting data right now. Upcoming events, we're really busy. We're out and trying to be with you in person as well as online. If you're heading to Kumu, we hope to see you there on October 26th. We'll be there the whole time, but our presentation's in the morning. Our session is going to talk about the community engagement elective and the leadership for public purpose elective. So if you're thinking about those kinds of things, come see us and say hello. We're also going to be on the road in person quite a bit over the next few weeks as well. October 27th, we're hosting a workshop at UCLA. On October 28th, we're doing some work for community colleges. That's a hybrid event, so you can attend in person or online. October 2nd and 3rd, we'll be in Chicago at DePaul University doing a day-and-a-half workshop, followed by a similar workshop day-and-a-half at Northeastern University in Boston. All of the ways to register for these in-person events are on our website, which I'll kind of show you here in a second. Please attend. We're really excited to be hosting some engaging kind of Carnegie in action style workshops that focus on community building, community engaged research, and how that integrates our partnerships into the application process, and really celebrating that community and bringing it forward. We also mentioned peer review process. The call for reviewers will be open November 14th to December 14th. Watch for an email from us, and it'll be on our website as well, the link to submit your application. We would love a wide variety of reviewers, folks who have previously been classified, not been classified, folks in different institutional types. We'd love it all to make sure we really bring diverse perspectives into the review process. So please, if you're at all interested, please submit. We're also going to pay reviewers for their time. So that's hopefully an added bonus for you as well, to support your labor and as well. You've heard us talk about AC Engage. We put it in the chat. There's also a QR code that works. I checked it this morning. If you have her AC Engage is a online community. It looks a lot like old school Facebook. It's got an activity feed, but also has a repository of documents. We list all of our webinars and workshops. As Marisol mentioned, we have just about bi-weekly open Q&A sessions where you can drop in like office hours and ask anything you'd like about the process. And we're here for you, and you can ask each other questions too. It's open-ended that way. So please join us. And the goal is for this to not just be about the application process, but really a conversation of best practices of community engagement that speak to be long-term and not just short-lived for the application. And that's our website. If you haven't found it yet, it's all there. Anything you need, hopefully it's another one-stop shop for all resources related to the application and any questions that you have, and it's a great way to find us. So I'm gonna shut it off from there. I'm gonna stop sharing and also bring up any questions.
Our panelists, Patrick, Justin, Emily, and Brenda. We really appreciate your time and expertise, and thanks for the folks who stayed. You're troopers. So, and I see my friends on here too, which is nice. Thank you all. See you. Emily, Patrick, Justin, Brenda, if you have a minute to stay afterwards, we'll just touch base really quickly. Thanks. Bye, everyone.